thank you everyone for coming. It was kind of a crazy traffic mess, so glad everyone got here on time. It's going to be a great panel. I want to thank the panel members for coming, and for those of you guys who aren't members of ELIPS, it's the Entertainment Law and IP section of LA County Bar. We are happy that you guys came. We look forward to doing a lot more of these types of events. I want to say thank you to Fatima Jones, who is our LACBA staff representative, and she really helped out putting this together. Before further ado, before that, I just want to make sure everyone turns off their cell phones so we don't have any interruptions. And we're going to start with panel discussion, and if we have time at the end, we're going to open up to Q&A. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to our moderator, Jeff Glassman. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sharok. Thank you so much for all your hard work in organizing this. I think you guys are in for a treat. Sharok has put together a fantastic panel of speakers. And so what I want to do, which I think will be slightly unusual in terms of the format, is leave it open to questions throughout the process, because I think that the intellectual and collective brain trust up here is something that many of you probably want to tap into, and you have very specific questions. So I want to make sure you get your questions asked and answered. Yes, I'll save some time at the end for some Q&A, but if something comes up, part of a discussion that is relevant to you, a client, your business, feel free to raise your hand and you can chime in with the conversation. And the same holds true with the panel. I have a bunch of questions that I want to ask each of you. And then I have some questions that I want to pose to the panel at large. But if I'm talking to someone about something that you have a few words of advice on, please feel free to chime in, because I want to create sort of an active dialogue, not only by and among the panel members, but between the panel and the audience members as well. So, my name is Jeff Glassman. I am a corporate attorney at the law firm of Irvin, Cohen & Jessup. I represent a lot of new media and technology companies, many of which are startup companies. I was in-house counsel to a software development company in San Francisco during the height of the dot-com boom, and when we ran out of money and went bankrupt, I came down here. A story I'm sure you've heard time and time again. So let me do something before we actually get started, and that is give the panel an opportunity to sort of give you a brief introduction so you have a sense of the angles that they're coming from. We've got a VC, we've got someone who runs an incubator, we've got a CEO, a lawyer, a couple of lawyers. So I want to let them...
At least two.
At least two, not including me. So let me start with Dale Fox, who is the CEO, current CEO of Tribogenics, but a serial entrepreneur by nature. So Dale, would you take a few minutes and give everybody a sense of where you come from and what you're doing now?
Sure. So again, Dale Fox. I'm a serial entrepreneur and inventor. I've been running companies for the better part of about 25 years. Actually, 25 is a magic number. I think I've also launched 25 products. I started the very first company back in the mobile space back in 1993. Created the first software and accessories in that space. Many people know me as the guy who invented that clear plastic film that goes over the surface of your iPhones and your iPads and your Androids. So that was one of my big claim to fame. Also developed the first flash for camera phones, the first Wi-Fi detector, the first two-way language translation software, and a number of products that were really innovative in that space. After selling that company, I'm now the CEO of a DARPA-funded tech transfer project that came out of the UCLA Physics Lab to create microscopic X-ray sources that have applications across the whole industry. Think transistors for the X-ray market.
Dale, thank you. Jeff Solomon, who is, excuse me, the founder of Amplify LA. Jeff, you are a self-proclaimed startup junkie. Tell us about Amplify LA.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Solomon. I'm also a serial entrepreneur. As of late, I founded and my partners and I are running Amplify, which is a startup accelerator, which is very similar to an incubator. It's sort of semantics, but essentially what we do is invest a small amount of money in a lot of companies and try to jumpstart them to some success. So we'll put in roughly $50,000 into 40 companies over the next 2 years and give them office space, guidance, mentorship, and hopefully help them raise more money if they need it and get on their way to an exit of some sorts.
Good. Jeff, thank you for being here. Samit Varma, a partner at Anthem Venture Partners and the last remaining Redskins fan on Earth.
RG3.
RG3, that's right. That may change.
So Samit Varma, I am a former naval nuclear submarine officer, and then did a software startup, tech transfer out of USC. Did that for about 3.5 years, and then became a partner in a venture fund about 5 years ago. And we do seed stage and early stage venture capital investments, anywhere from 1 to about 3 million. And we focus on technology, software, and kind of innovative new business models. We're on our 3rd fund now and have about 275 million under management.
And you've invested in some of our companies.
And we have invested in some amplified companies.
Terrific. Simon, thank you for being here. David Michael, a partner at Zuber, Lawler, and Del Duca LLP, a business attorney. David.
Okay, thank you. I've been a transactional attorney since 1996, venture capitalist in the late 90s for a company called Rare Medium, they did a $70 million venture arm. I've handled operations for an 80-person company back when I was 22, and ran my own firm for 11 years. And most of my transactions, I work with both startups as well as Fortune 500 clients in strategic advisory services, as well as transactional work, and mostly in IT, cloud computing, software still, managed services, as well as brand licensing.
Terrific. David, thank you for being here. Art Rose, a partner at Kenobi Martins LLP and patent lawyer extraordinaire.
Well, thank you. Boy, it's quite a panel here. I'm a intellectual property lawyer. That means patent, trademarks, and copyrights, also trade secrets. I was an examiner at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for 4.5 years, and then worked for a judge for a year on the U.S. Court of Claims in the patent side, and then have been now at Kenobi Martins, Olson & Bear since in the 80s, so 30 years now.
Terrific. Art, thank you for being with us. Okay, Dale, you are, I want to start with you. I know that several members of the panel have been CEOs, but currently you're the CEO of Tribogenics, and you gave sort of a laundry list of the things that you've been involved with. Mobile, electronics, Facebook platform is something that you've worked in. You've built iPhone apps. And so I think I'm curious to know how you identify intellectual property you want to invest your time and energy in. You seem like you're an inventor by nature, but is that how it begins? You see something that the marketplace demands or needs and you go out and build it?
You know, up until a couple years ago, that was the only way it worked for me. It's historically, I've always developed my own product concepts. I literally find a problem that annoys me and solve it. And for some reason, those things always seem to happen in the shower. I really don't understand the underlying principles here, but you know, you're in the shower, you get some aha moment, a great product idea comes to you, or something you think is great, right? You're one man, one idea. So normally you go through this vetting process. You bring it up to your friends, right? You talk about it, you get input, am I crazy, am I not? You know, has anybody seen this before? You start to validate it, you get momentum behind an idea. And then at some point you decide to invest a little bit of capital, explore it, maybe prototype it out, explore it with other people, do limited manufacturing, and eventually move forward and take it to market. That was me until 3 years ago. My big aha moment was discovering that I don't have to come up with all my own ideas. There are these magical giant incubators all over California, filled with hundreds of PhDs toiling away in poverty, working on incredible blue sky stuff, funded sometimes by non-dilutive government grants, millions of dollars of equipment at their disposal. And they work all the time. When they come up with something brilliant, instead of taking that to market, they turn around and they look to us, entrepreneurs, lawyers. They look to business people to solve these problems for them. This is the university system, and it's called tech transfer. And it was the biggest discovery of my life, and it changed the way I view the world. So instead of taking all the product risk myself and actually having to validate my own ideas, raise capital early on, which is highly dilutive, waste years, which is highly dilutive, I can cherry pick all these incredible ideas from all these different domains that are already validated and sitting out there, oftentimes with IP behind them. The company that I'm the CEO of now is the first time I actually haven't developed the idea behind the company. And yet, I couldn't be happier. I mean, I've got an incredibly disruptive technology that required disciplines that were much more diverse than my own skill set, and came to me with 3 patents, you know, years of research, published papers, the cover of Nature magazine, you know, all these incredible accomplishments. And we spent some time, admittedly, getting through the tech transfer process and extracting that value from the university and productizing it. But the royalties that we gave up and the equity we gave up pale in comparison to what would happen if I had actually run my own research laboratory and tried to fund that development for years and years. So I think the answer is, historically, I like to create my own things. Now, I'm not so sure anymore. I mean, I still like to create and ideate. It's a great passion of mine, and I build portfolios of things. But understanding the market advantage that tech transfer has, I would do this again in a heartbeat. And just for the record, these universities are starving for commercialization. They're desperately looking for people like us to come in and say, I know how to make money with what you just did. This stuff is languishing inside of the hallways. You walk the hallways of USC, Berkeley, UCLA, and the tech transfer offices are hungry for CEOs right now. So it's a buyer's market.
So let me ask you a question, Dale, and this is a question I don't want to pose just to you. I want anybody on the panel, and I think I'm going to try and target Jeff for this one. It seems to me that at the stage you're at now, if you're targeting universities, you are going after patented technologies, correct? That's a prerequisite almost in terms of you committing your time and energy. You want to make sure that the intellectual property in and of itself has value before you start to try and build a company around it.
Or at least filed,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes you get a couple of provisionals under your belt.
Yeah, most of them are patent pending or provisionals they file. A lot of the university tech transfer programs, they let their patent applications lapse if they don't find licensees. It is a problem. They've got a lot of great technology in their systems, just not enough people willing to license. And they've gotten actually better at their terms with respect to royalties and working with licensors or licensees, for that matter, to get commercialization of that intellectual property, because the worst thing they want to have happen is that their IP doesn't get exploited and get out there in the marketplace. And they will revoke those licenses if you just try to sit on them.
So let me sort of contrast that with the kinds of companies that Jeff Solomon is working with. Jeff, do you find that it's almost exactly the opposite in your environment, an accelerator environment, where there are mostly ideas and people running around without patents, as opposed to the university environment where there's a huge volume of patented ideas that just have the absence of a business and people to drive them?
Yeah, most of the time, most of the deals that we see aren't like that. Although I will say that we have seen at least 3 or 4 that came out of the universities, and we're pretty tied to UCLA and USC, and you know, we go speak there on panels and help them. And I have noticed it, but I've actually not been explained it the way you just explained it. But I've observed this. Like I was on a panel, I was judging a MBA class. They have all these, right? And so one of the teams got up there and they were working with some technology that they got out of a different department. And even the professor of that was sort of stunned. And this lady said that she had like gone down all the channels at UCLA and found out that like nobody wanted the technology. Like she could just sort of take it and run with it. And like she really had a clear argument of how she had determined that. And the professor was like, well, go lock that, like leave the class right now and go lock it down because that technology is fantastic. And it kind of speaks to what you're saying. There's just a lot of people. So and now I feel good that I just did this, but there's a program at USC where they take that technology and they create a year-long course where they try to bring in other entrepreneurs to help validate the ideas to see if there's businesses. And so I just signed up to be like a mentor or whatever to try and help create businesses around this tech. It's very interesting.
But talk to me about the accelerator.
Yeah, so our deals,
and your process.
Yeah, so for the most part, our deals are earlier stage entrepreneurs that are dealing with things that aren't very patentable or wouldn't really make sense. So they're internet sites or e-commerce sites or maybe content plays. I would say we aren't just seeing very early stuff. Like we see ideas on napkins and kids just out of college. We do see that stuff, but for the most part, the market is so competitive right now and there's so much opportunity that the deals we're actually doing are quite a bit more mature. both in terms of the idea being having a full product, in some cases having revenue. We're about to do a deal where they have almost $250,000 in revenue, which is, I mean, crazy. I never would have thought that would have been the case. And guys that have had, that have been CEOs of big companies, that have, you know, raised money before, have even had exits. Just, it's, you know, these guys are seeing so many deals that that's what comes after us, right? They go to the Anthems and the Greycrofts of the world, and you guys are seeing so many deals. It's like, how do you pick? And so to have some validation actually makes an impact. So I think we're seeing more mature stuff.
So Samit, talk to me about the transition from accelerator into being a company that could potentially tap into VC capital. It seems to me that you and your funds have somewhat transitioned in recent years from focusing perhaps on more hard technologies and hardware-oriented companies, and now are playing, I think, probably a majority of the companies that you actually have in your own individual portfolio are software related. And so how does an idea that's incubated and accelerated by Jeff transition into someone that, or a company that you might be interested in?
Yeah, so it's actually a interesting phenomenon that has happened this last year. This time last year there was 0 incubators in LA, and now there's, I can think of probably 8 that I could list right now. Not of the quality of Amplify, of course, but
Very nice.
But you know, and so when this all happened, it all happened kind of coincidentally. It all happened kind of together, and we sat down and had a lot of meetings and said, hey, you know, how are we going to play this? There's an incubator system that's really growing right now. How are we going to participate in this? What's going to come out of this? And frankly, the hopes were not very high. We thought that there was going to be a lot of, you know, these really early college kids with an idea. They were going to be, you know, applying to these incubators, and it's just going to be kind of trash, and we didn't really care about it too much. We couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, the companies that are coming out of these incubators are very, very advanced, very, very good entrepreneurs that just happen to not be plugged into the Anthems and the Greycrofts and that network. So maybe they've come from DC, maybe they've been guys who've started their own companies and sold it without taking any venture capital before. You know, those are the guys I really want to invest in. They're the smartest ones. So it's, you know, we've been really, really impressed with that. And in the earlier part of our funds, we did probably 6 of these tech transfer deals out of UCLA and Caltech. And we did a lot of these, and they're hard technology. And, you know, we were the first investors in Solar Flare, which has taken now $260 million in venture capital. And we're only a $100 million fund. I mean, so those things take a lot longer and a lot more money to capitalize. But now you've got an infrastructure and an ecosystem on the internet which is ridiculously cheap. You can start a company using Amazon Web Services for cloud. You don't even have to buy a server. You can literally start it, buy your Mac. Everything is free. You can set up an e-commerce site for free. Domain, everything you want is basically free. You get a little bit of development, and boom, you're off to the races. And so it's challenged people to not focus on those things in their company, focus on really innovative, new kind of business models and strategies. And that's what we see coming out of these incubators. It's been really exciting for us. It's now, frankly, become competitive on our side to get the best deals that are coming out of the incubators. It's completely opposite of what I would have thought it was. So we're out there talking to the Jeff Solomons of the world and saying, show me the best stuff early, get me in there early.
I want to try and find out when a patent lawyer like Art gets involved, because it seems to me that it's almost discouraged in some ways, because the drive really is to build a business, not an IP portfolio. And so at the accelerator level, are you encouraging your companies to go ahead and contact patent attorneys right out of the gate to see if there is something that is patentable about their ideas? And then Art, I want to get your feedback on what you're doing with young companies that contact you in that regard. So first, Jeff.
For the most part, no, but it's primarily because intuitively I don't really see anything. Now, I don't peg myself as like the ultimate patent guy, but a lot of the stuff just, it doesn't seem like there's patent there. Now, a couple of our companies have a few things, like I think 1 or 2 of them have some pending things, but for the most part, the businesses just don't really have anything that makes sense. Now, there is IP around the content that they're creating, other kinds of things, which, you know, I think there's some protection that they should be looking out for. And I mentioned on our call, too, about the whole, where am I infringing? That's also an area to look at, not so much where can I protect, but how do I not infringe? Which is something that I think we underlook a little bit. be a little bit careful of.
Yeah, I would chime in. I think that's the biggest risk for investors, that they focus a lot on the development, and they don't, it's not until there's a capital call because there's a huge patent infringement claim against their portfolio company that they got to fork up some more money. You know, I'm a friend of our Clearstone. It's annoying, quite frankly, to have to pay more money for these licenses. And you look at something like Nest Labs being sued by Honeywell for patent infringement is an unexpected expense for the company and their trajectory for their exit. So there is a defense mechanism, not only just to create a monopoly, a legal monopoly for protecting your position in the marketplace, but there's also the defensive mechanism of protecting against future expenses.
But the challenge is that some of the greatest ideas and the greatest talent when the companies are in their formative stage have very little money, right, Jeff? You're staking there with $50,000 bucks. Art, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with an underfunded client that has a great and patentable idea, whether it be business methods patent or some sort of a design or utility patent? How do you deal with it on your end? Are you finding that you have to delay the process before you're engaged?
Well, so I want to respond to Jeff's point, which I think is a good one. That's that I have all different kinds of clients. Some that think that nothing that they come up with is patentable, and others that think that everything is patentable. And so it is a good idea. It's not that expensive to meet with a patent lawyer and at least get some idea of what is available. What I find these days is that if you're on a very tight budget, there are lots and lots of available resources. For example, once you get going in the right direction, Google Patents has this great patent search engine. Probably when I was at the patent office, some of the examiners end up just getting on there and using it, and it's really worthwhile. So, and very cheap. And so you can have your client take a quick look on there and see whether there's something new that he's got or whether it's already been patented. Go ahead.
But Arthur, in that case, isn't it very difficult for lay people to be able to read a patent application, read the claims, and be able to determine or assess that there might be an infringement or a problem?
So I'm looking at, yes, and you're absolutely right. And the thing I'm looking for is sort of a common sense look at it. Yeah. And I think that I was talking to my son one time about a new, he's a real mechanical type guy. He takes engines apart, and he had this interesting idea for a transmission. And so I said, well, yeah, it sounds interesting. Why don't you try looking it up on Google? He was able to do it pretty much all by himself and found exactly what he had invented in his mind. Okay. And so it's not so much that you need to analyze the claims, which is also important, as you point out, when you're looking at infringement, but you're really just looking to see whether someone had the same idea as you, and that's not so hard to do.
Jeff, I wonder if I could ask a question of Art. Right now, I'm working on a technology, and I come from a patent background where I would patent mechanical things, but my approach to software has been probably almost the reverse, and I'm just curious what you think. I did an extensive IP search. I pulled every patent that was remotely similar, and what that allowed me to do is navigate from a development point of view. Don't do this, do it this way, so you don't end up in infringement here. And so being knowledgeable at a patent level and reading the claims, I think when you come up with a technology, helps you avoid that infringement later. And we're almost exclusive. Before we've written the first line of code, we know everyone's patent. We know exactly how it has to be executed from a method point of view. And I think you end up maybe avoiding a BlackBerry situation where you're going to get shut down in 24 hours.
Right. Yeah. The flip side of that is that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Unless you're BlackBerry.
Well, but for that case, there's hundreds of others, right, where sometimes you just have to get out there and build it. There's a lot of cases where technology infringes or you have copyright infringement, and if you build something, you create enough value, you're going to pay a piece of it, but you're better off than if you never built it in the first place because you got shut down.
Yeah, I want to
That's a bit of a
follow
cowboy
up on
mentality.
what you're saying. What I find these days is that more and more people, including very large companies, are doing exactly what you're saying, Dale, and that is you know, for many years, we used to get these detailed clearance searches that we would do. And yeah, and now, yeah, freedom to operate searches. And now we don't do as many of those because starting from the biggest companies, IBM used to do this. They don't do it at all anymore. They just roll the product out and then they deal with it later, you know. And two of the entrepreneurs like yourself who are just starting up, and they exactly what you're doing. They say, damn the torpedoes, let's just build it and get something out there and get good management in place, and we'll figure out how to deal with those guys that come after us.
That's right. We counsel our companies. I mean, basically, they're kind of the same thing. It's you know, yeah. I mean, innovate, get your product out. You're going to be probably below the radar anyway, so just get it out there, do it, and then if we have to tweak it or something, we'll tweak it and not infringe the patent.
So let's talk about the next phase of what you do with the IP, and that is how to monetize it. And Dale, I want to start with you. Is there a process that you have after working with all these different kinds of products and companies whereby you know exactly the process you have to go through in order to figure out how to monetize, or is it unique and different for each product?
I wish it was such an easy formula. Some things you want to build, I like to build products. And there's a reward in doing that, but look, at the end of the day, you create more value the farther you drive things down the chain, right? If I come up with an idea and I sell it to you in a napkin for $1, that's one amount of value. If I then patent it, it's more. If I patent and prototype, it's more. If I patent and prototype and license. So the farther you move down the value chain, the more value you create. You also, however, require more capital, more time, and more risk. It's an inherent trade-off. Understanding the product, its potential, the costs, and the risks, you have to make an informed decision every time, and there is no easy answer. I've had things I've built and licensed right off the bat, and others that I've run down and built entire product companies around with manufacturing, distribution, sales, industrial design, and the whole shebang. I think each one was the right decision in the right case.
Jeff, let me ask you, a big part of what you do at Amplify is mentor, right? So you've got a variety of different kinds of engineers, coders, entrepreneurs that come in with their ideas. Maybe they start to sort of formulate what the intellectual property and the value of that IP is going to look like. Is a big part of what you do help them figure out how to monetize?
Sometimes, but more often than not, the companies now are starting to get that you need to make money. Although it's kind of an interesting phenomenon because we had this, there was a whole period it was like, I don't need to make money, I'll just build up and then eventually I'll do something like Instagram, right? I'll just get big and then I'll get bought, right? So that started to shift and more investors were like, you've got to have a business model, like how are you going to make money? And I was definitely in that camp for a long time, like I don't even want to talk to you unless you have a way to make money. But now I'm actually going back the other way and I'm allowing our entrepreneurs to, and I'm giving them the advice like, if your business is truly about acquiring users, yes, if you have enough users, there are ways to make money. So I'm sort of giving a little bit more leeway to let them look at the strategies to get users because there are business models there. I think they need to be cognizant of how they're ultimately going to exit or make money. But putting someone too far on the, if you can't think of a way to make money on day one, then I'm not interested, which is where I was. I like being a little bit more flexible to see what is best for this particular business. Is it a user business or is it a revenue business? And letting it sort of find its path, sort of how I'm guiding entrepreneurs today.
It's about value, right?
Yeah.
Value doesn't always correlate to revenue in the short term. Right?
So, Samit, when it gets to the point where a company is perhaps worth an investment by your venture fund, your background is both in investment and operations. Is that a big part of what you do when you put money inside of a company that you believe in? Do you, I don't want to say take over operations, but do you have a venture formula, if you will, that you sort of require that they adhere to?
Yeah, I mean, our venture formula is pretty simple, and pretty much the only thing we care about is the management team and their operational capability. The idea is, you know, it's got to be big enough to be a venture capital idea. It can't be a hair salon down the street. But as long as the market's big enough, the idea for me has very little value. It's pretty much 90% plus on the management team. And the reason is because we invest at such an early stage that the business idea and the business model is probably going to go through 3 or 4 different incarnations by the time it gets to what it really is going to be when it's grown up. So the entrepreneur's ability to recognize that and recognize the market and change his product and change his business is the only thing that really matters for us. So I look very, very strongly, I put a lot of weight on the operational aspect of it. I think that's probably the only thing that's important at our stage of investing.
What do you look for in a management team?
So we look for, it's really sort of pattern recognition. We've just seen hundreds and thousands of these guys, well, probably hundreds of these guys. And we look for patterns of success and patterns of, I really like to back multiple time entrepreneurs. And if they're not it's a special flavor of person that can raise money. Raising money is not easy. It's probably one of the most important things that a company can do. And if they have a pattern of being able to raise money with the right contacts, the right network, that's important to us. It's important that they've managed a company through a period of high growth, because that is a different thing than managing any other company. So you can give me a VP from Dell or something like that, and they've never managed a company through a period of high growth. It's a very different skill set. So we look for those kinds of things. We look for people that have a vision for their company, whether or not that vision is the one that actually makes it to the end. We want to see where they see their company at 3 years from now, kind of thing.
So David, I want to turn to you now, and I want to get a sense from the business lawyer's perspective about how you advise clients to use intellectual property, and maybe perhaps some of the other things that are being talked about by the entrepreneurs at the table to amplify enterprise value and increase their pre-money valuation, so that before they start meeting with Summit, they've met with you and you've given them sort of a field vision, if you will, for the things they need to put in place to improve valuation.
Well, I think IP is the smallest part. Like Summit was saying that fundamentally, since I was working in VC role as well, it's always been about management team comes first. I think the IP is secondary because, like you said, the business models change. I'm more of a fundamentalist, kind of like how Jeff said he was on this side. It's like, how does the business make money? Because I always think that there's only going to be so many Facebooks that get out there first, where it's all about the users and monetizing using advertising. And now with the privacy laws becoming more restrictive, it's going to be harder for them to monetize. I don't believe that the lottery ticket winners are, that's a good business model even for a VC. So I think if you're going to fundamentally focus on a core business to create a monopoly and a competitive advantage using IP, that you really need to know, what that IP is. And sometimes the VCs don't care about the IP, and that's okay. I mean,
So I'm curious, I know that 4 out of the 5 panelists believe that, but Art, I want to turn to you. Do you believe, or in your experience, have you seen issues that have cropped up as a result of a little bit of neglect on the part of the founders of a particular company building and protecting an IP portfolio in the way that they should have?
Yeah, I was chomping at the bit.
You were scrambling there, writing note after note. I figured I had to turn to you.
So Summit is absolutely right that the main thing you look for is management. But what I found is that if you mess up, it's not so much the positive side, but if you don't have these VCs mainly, I don't know about Summit, but mainly they have a checklist, and one of the things on the checklist is IP. And on the IP checklist, they want to know that you own everything. And so if you can't go to them and say, oh yeah, I've got everything, I've got my agreements in place, every single employee has signed an agreement that they're going to assign all their rights to me, every single software fellow that I've hired, that person has signed an agreement, I've got a consulting agreement with them, I own everything. If you don't have those things in place, Summit, I think, won't have that checkbox, and then you won't get a deal with him.
sometimes they do it at closing or right before too.
So, I think it's an important point because, as much as I'm saying like we don't care about IP, so we invest at the early stage and we follow our companies all the way to exit. It's a very important thing. Every single one of our companies that is in the exit stage and is talking to Dell and Microsoft and IBM and Google, guess what they only care about almost?
Yeah.
IP. So the first thing they say is, show me the IP portfolio. How many patents do you have? They really, really care about that. It's not at year 1, it's not at year 2, it's at year 6 when the company is mature and they've built a business. They really, really beat us us up on that IP. And so prior to that, somewhere in between year 0 and year 6, we have to build a strong IP
But
platform.
it's not in
Yeah.
startup mode.
But it's not in startup mode.
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that, because even in startup mode, what I found is that if you're on a very tight budget, you can still maybe afford a couple $1,000 to prepare a provisional application. And again, what I see here is that people like Summit who know where the company has to go are very happy to see that IP patent box checked off. They don't even look at the thing, but they see that there is a patent box checked out. They go, oh, that's good. But that's it. That's the end of it.
It seems to me if you've waited 3 years on the IP, you forfeited your right to the patent. And that's why it's a scramble, because you're trying to figure out what's not been disclosed.
I mean, you're right, to some degree, it's a scramble. And it's, okay, well, let's patent this part that just came up, and it's a scramble. But the bottom line is a startup with 4 or 5 people, you know, you might be able to file a provisional if it's important for that kind of a business. But the time it takes and hassle and go and deal on expense, it's just, it's not worth it.
Jeff, a two-part question, if I may?
Sure, let me ask one of my own before I forget, and then I'm going to turn to you, and that is, Art, if they put together a patent portfolio, how does a VC, and maybe it's not directed only to Art, but whoever wants to answer that, how is it a determinative factor in terms of what the value of the patent is, right? You could have 1, you could have 30, unless you have a lay of the land and you have an understanding of what the business model is and what the competition is like, how do you attribute value in the way that Art was describing as a check the box without really doing your own due diligence and figuring out what the value of the individual claims are? Is it sort of you're in blind if it's got the box checked, you move forward and invest, or you really do some due diligence to determine the actual value of the patents themselves?
What I see done in this area where you do have someone who takes it to the next level is they do sort of a landscape study. So that's where you literally find patents in your area or around your area and see how much is being patented in that area. They come up with these landscape looks at it. So that can be worthwhile.
Do you see VCs actually doing that? Or, because to me it would seem that it's not their business model. That sounds more like an M&A type model where
It tends to be more of an M&A model.
Yeah,
I would never do that. I would never do that.
Not worth your time.
Not only that, I don't think VCs have the expertise. I mean, they could always hire attorneys, but I don't think it's in their business model. They fund, maybe 10 deals a year if you're, lucky, and the model is, you make 1 or 2 of those really fly if you're lucky, and the rest are going to be dogs, and that's the ratio. And so to put that much effort into the IP when that's more of an M&A strategy for, what are we acquiring? We're acquiring people. We want to acquire a competitive advantage to seal out a market competitor or to acquire market share. Then the IP becomes very important. And so for developing a company from startup to the sales stage, that's the enterprise value as well. How do we position it so that the buyers would value this thing in their strategic acquisition strategy?
So let me pause for a moment. I want to let a question be asked here.
I'm Nancy McCullough from the ELIPS board. I also sit on the board of an organization called California Lawyers for the Arts, and one of the things that we do is provide legal services to people that don't have them, which often tend to be creative people with startups, with all kinds. So I'm trying to figure out at the point at which they arrive at the accelerator, the incubator, at Dale's doorstep, when you see that in addition to the patent issues, which I'm less qualified to talk about, I'm more in trademark and copyright myself, but when and how do you get them to the council? Because sometimes I'm thinking they're going to need partnership agreements drafted. They're going to need all kinds of business development agreements drafted. There's probably a panoply of things they haven't done. I'd like to know how you go about getting them to council and how either ELIPS, my other organization, or the wide variety of lawyers that love to work with up-and-coming people, how do you get them the legal help that they need?
That's a big, for us, that's a big part of what we bring to the table for these guys. You actually pointed it out. You mentioned, do your employees have their contracts? that's a bunch of junk that I forgot to do in my first company, and it came back to bite me. Like, it wasn't the end of the world, but it was a pain in the ass. So now, two parts to answer your question. Yes, we help our companies sort of deal with all that stuff. Nothing to do with IP and patents. It's more around, you have the contracts, the basics in place, and it's actually become highly, highly competitive from a law firm standpoint to get that business. So each of the incubators has basically one exclusive, and maybe one sort of straggler attorney or law firm that actually puts up quite a bit of money in sponsorship to get first dibs at those deals. Almost all of them have that. It's very competitive.
Or deferred compensation.
And they're all deferred. No, we wouldn't even do it. It's all deferred. Like our law firm defers $20,000 in legal fees until they get a Series A done, and they give us a very large amount of money because they get first look. I mean, because historically, if you get into it's
I
marketing.
still can't figure out.
If you get into the startup and then they go do a Series A, first of all, they make a lot of money on the Series A, which sucks for the entrepreneur once they realize how much money it costs. But then they never leave. Like, you stick with that law firm forever, so it's a good expense.
Do they even ask for a retainer?
No.
No, they keep track, and then it's just all deferred.
Yeah, some of them even invest.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them trade equity when it comes down when they do the deal. A
Yeah.
lot of them,
Some of them
local guys.
Some of the big
Yeah,
firms
cash.
do that.
We make them pay all that stuff before, we make them clean up everything before they come to us, and then we make them pay our own legal fees.
Yeah, that's.
So you end up, you pay it yourself because you invested and then the money.
Well, you get the equity.
So
You get
this
the
is-
equity.
You get the- yeah,
Yeah.
you
Easy
get a percentage of it.
retainer.
We do. I recently read a book called The End of Lawyers, and I didn't believe it was true until this very moment. I'm realizing that we're in trouble. I had another question right here.
Thank you. Earlier in the discussion, Dale, you and David were alluding to the halls of the university where there's technology that you see it, nobody's doing anything with it, and you know that it has value in the marketplace. First part of my question is, do you license it? Do you purchase a license from the university?
Yes.
And then,
It's a contract, yeah,
okay,
license.
and then the second part of the question is, once you have the license, can you take that to sources of capital and say, what I have is a license to this, it's not my technology, but I have to have a license.
Right, that's essentially
how it works.
prototype.
That's his
Yeah.
business model.
Right, so
Absolutely.
the downside of this right now is the universities, NVCA and a whole bunch of others have started to standardize Series A docs, right, for first investment. The process there has been reducing friction, shortening time, and making everybody's life easier, making it cheaper. The universities haven't done this yet, so every deal is custom, which means it takes a year.
So is that a potential revenue source for
You gotta know the
universities?
right people.
For you guys.
It is.
Yeah, well, or you can take the deal you want, but if you want to get the deal you want, it takes a little more time. It's a matter of attrition.
So is that a revenue stream for universities?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
That's-
my
they-
God,
They make
yes.
so much
It's
money.
a revenue stream, it's a PR thing, they love
Yeah.
doing this. The
Right.
problem is that they're not used to doing it. There's maybe 2 or 3, Stanford, MIT, and Caltech are really the only ones who do this
Really
well
well.
now.
Yeah, and they're not incentivized internally
And
either.
they're not, they have no incentive internally, the guy doing the deal he doesn't care, and so, UCLA has
UCLA is
been,
getting better.
it has been
They're getting
bad,
better.
but they're getting better. But some of these, USC took 2 years, the company I ran, honestly, took 2 years to get that technology out there. Huge
So
pain.
there's a big opportunity, by the way, since you're a bunch of lawyers, to go in and create a process here.
Absolutely.
Right, this is
that we
if I
need
wasn't
that
doing this,
badly.
that's what I would do.
Going
I'd
to
go
create
in,
what?
I would go in
What are you working on?
and create a incubator-style system that standardized the process of tech transfer, put in a tiny bit of capital, doing what you're doing, but doing is the hybrid between university and out.
That
and
is
feed into
so
you guys.
needed.
There's a lot of politics going on in universities as well, and
Yeah.
budget cuts and pressure, so, obviously not for the private
Amplify
university,
you.
but
Pardon me, would it be essentially the same business model for a state university or a private university?
So somewhat moot. Yeah, they all need money.
well, they don't need money, but I think that the budget cuts and the politics also play a role into, I think the university's getting more desperate for their tech transfer, so now is the best time.
But they're also, they're scared. They're scared of making mistakes.
Very scared.
Right, that's the real risk here, is they're paralyzed, this process is paralyzed by fear, the fear of making a mistake. And so
Well,
there's-
Yeah, but having advocates inside the university,
Oh,
the
yeah.
relationships make
Absolutely.
it easier. And-
It does.
And they do grease the wheels for you internally.
Yes.
So let me put a twist on this, and that is outside of the university, right? And dealing with the ever-growing population of entrepreneurs and companies that are being incubated and accelerated. In terms of the term sheets that they should expect to see for a seed round or a Series A round, Is it true that everything is in fact becoming sort of a well-balanced document that would be blessed by the National Venture Association? Or is there extensive negotiation because at the end of the day, it's the individual entrepreneur and his baby that are at stake, so he's going to want what he wants? David, can I start with you?
Well, I don't know, was it 2 years ago, Dale, so Dale and I spoke at this, it was kind of like an incubator. It's called the Founders Institute. And they were purporting to offer this class of stock called F-shares, which basically gave all these, Mark Zuckerberg type rights, claiming that this is the time for the entrepreneur, and they call the shots. I mean, they were watching too much television, in my opinion, and I think that philosophy obviously has changed. VCs have a responsibility to their limited partners, and they also, I don't see that demanding position is actually going to get you very far in the marketplace unless you are one of the most exceptional entrepreneurs with the most exceptional business models, which is very difficult to produce. Now, there are people that have something that will create an auction, and it's the only time where you can have leverage as an entrepreneur.
In the seed space, that is happening right now. If you look at a long tail of time and now in the future, yes, it's more controlled by standards and investors. But right now, the entrepreneurs are getting unique deals, and things have gone away that I don't think will come back. There was a period, I hope it doesn't come back, when VCs were taking liquidation preferences and significant multiples, like 2x, 3x, 4x liquidation preferences. First of all, a lot of entrepreneurs don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
So that was a period when people were like, at the end of the company, they try to sell, and like, oh, by the way, you're not going to make any money on this deal, right? So that stuff isn't happening, but the deals are getting competitive, and so I've seen where entrepreneurs are getting things they want.
But isn't it based on having really good deals?
Surprisingly, in some ways, no. Like, I've seen some deals get funded, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what is going on?
Is it because there's stupid money in the marketplace right now?
It's weird. I mean, you've seen it a lot longer than I have. I've only been on the investing side for a year. Like, I've been building companies, so it's very new to me. But there's some illogical things going on.
There's
right
a lot
now.
of bad deals.
LA has probably about 4 or 5 venture funds that are really doing deals. The Bay Area has obviously hundreds, and we have seen the same thing, like unbelievable companies getting funded out of an incubator at $23 million valuation. $23 million, 3 guys and a product, really first-time entrepreneurs, not even
Sounds like
CEOs.
the 90s.
It's a little late 90s, right? And
That's
so,
Kind of
exactly.
raised, by the way, like curiosity in that case, how
What's
much capital coming in at that level?
so they raised $3.5 million.
Wow.
And we didn't even know, I liked the deal. I didn't know what any of the terms were. I reached out to the guy, and he's like, well, if you want, you can put in $100K, and here are the terms. And I'm just like, wow, this is like, so we need to take a step back and like breathe a little. So the nuttiness has come, it's come out recently in the last like 4 months, and it is. These guys are.
But look at the late
unbelievable
90s. Every VC that invested in those deals, most of them aren't around anymore.
That's right. That's right.
And you always have to stick to fundamentals as an investor. Always stick to rationality, and because there's a fervor in the marketplace about getting into the deal, you still have to get to the exit, and that could take several years, and the opportunities may dry up. I mean, when you were talking about Facebook, the $100 billion valuation, which was nuts to me, and they lost 25% of that value in a very short period of time, and I still don't think it's worth that much. It's the first kind of, there's only so many lottery ticket winners out there, and so if you're going to bet in that business, I think.
But there's a big difference right now that the dollar amounts that are going to these companies is much smaller. So if you're betting and you're putting in 50 million, like was happening in the 90s, and they're burning through that, it's very different than putting in like 250,000. So you see some of these big funds, like, it's interesting, you see like Excel and Benchmark and all these guys that are traditionally only doing like massive deals, now have these little, they all have new names, but they're like these little seed funds. And they're doing like $100,000, $250,000 deals, because really they don't care if they lose it. It's totally nothing. But if they can I shouldn't say they don't care,
It's
but
a foot in the door, you get Facebook,
if they can get their foot in the door,
Yeah.
it's a real smart
Still a lot of
strategy
work.
for them.
It's still a lot of work. Every deal is the same amount of work.
But not, so the
No,
way
because
these,
they're all notes.
these guys haven't done anything. So they've set up these little slush funds, and they'll just throw 100, 300, 500. They don't sit on the board, they don't call. You will not even, the entrepreneur will never get a call with that board member, or not board member, but with that partner. Never. Any AXL, they just throw it out and they leave it and they wait to see what happens. And what's going to happen is all these guys are getting funded.
So they're incubating.
They're incubating, basically. These guys are all getting funded, and a year from now, you know, these incubators, including Amplifier, have an amazing hit rate. All of their companies are getting funded, but they're getting funded with, you know, Series A type $1 to $3 million rounds. What's going to happen when the
They're
next?
not going to be able to fund.
They're not going to be
No,
able to.
there's no
fund.
doubt. In fact,
That's the problem.
one of the I knew that from day one, and I still see that. And I know that some of our companies won't make it, but the way that I look at it, the space is that, and this is why we built. And you like this part of our business model. Why we built a facility. I didn't want to just incubate our companies. We have 3 times the space we need, and we have this co-working space, and we move our companies there, and other companies come there because I know a lot of them are going to fail. But what's still going to be there is talent. And so if I can build a relationship with companies that fail, fine, you learned a lot, you failed. You learn a lot more when you fail, so I'm cool with that. Now let me insert you into the 1 of 10 that is actually kicking ass. And that, I think, is how the market will sort of clean itself up.
So you're subleasing the other space?
The other
to make
space,
it for cash?
yes.
That's the business.
It's a great business.
That was the main part you liked.
I love it. I love it.
So
I love it.
I feel an obligation, because the section has to do with intellectual property, to turn the conversation slightly away from finance and back to IP.
Okay.
So let me ask Art a question, and that is, Art, have you been involved in either a financing at an early stage, or bridge financing at a middle market stage, or even on the sale, on the event that is the sale of the company, in doing IP due diligence that actually ends up affecting the price, either the valuation of the company, for better or for worse, because the portfolio of IP that they were negotiating over ended up being less valuable or more valuable? Have you been involved in things like that?
Yeah, sure. The examples I have, though, are on the other side, on the side of the company, so defending, you know, due diligence. And so, for example, one case we had, they knew that we were going to go in the process of getting this funding, and so this company filed a lawsuit against us, and so we had to manage that. And of course, that's you know, obviously the company that's suing is saying, hey, I want to, you know, get some cash in order for you to clear through the funding, and so what we did was we were able to show the people that were funding this that there was no real merit to this lawsuit, and we're able to keep the valuation reasonably high. It went down a little bit, but reasonably high. So.
Taking into account the
Yeah.
legal fees that will no longer be there, because there'll be litigators that have to litigate on a contingent fee basis, because no one's going to be willing to pay for them, otherwise they lose all their business from the incubators. We have a question right here.
Yes, I'm just curious, when you're talking about companies coming out of incubators or technology coming out of universities, are you mostly talking about internet-based companies like, like this morning I read about a company that's come up with software for managing your frequent flyer miles. It's a new startup. Is that the kind of company that's coming out mostly, or is it just all different various kinds of
Probably
technology?
very different for the two of us.
Yeah, I would say.
We're on the hard science side, so I'm
Yeah,
dealing with physics,
life science.
chemistry, optics, life science, and
We're probably more in that category. In fact, we have a company that does something sort of like that.
I was going to say,
You know,
nice.
you know, I think you'll rarely see software type technology coming out of the, unless it's
Google being the notable example,
well,
right?
There's a lot of
It's a notable
content.
exception.
A lot of content's coming out of LA, so we have
but it
several
would come out of the
companies.
universities unless it's from the film school or something like that, right?
Yeah, no, there's there's a lot of video. I mean, video is crazy in LA. Like the video deals, there's so much content, whether it's creation of content or curation. There's a lot of that. But mostly
Publisher, media publishing, that sort of thing, yeah.
So Jeff, you have a blog. In one of your blog entries, you talk about distinguishing between intellectual property that is a business versus just another cool feature.
Yeah.
So how do you determine whether or not something that seems neat and new and innovative is something that you can build a company around rather than just an app?
Okay, well, I've actually changed my stance on that. And here's one of the things that the luxury of being an entrepreneur is that you're designed to be iterative, and so.
And you're accountable to no one.
That too, but when I sort of take this role I'm in, I've sort of evolved the way I approach it. Like I said, I was very hard on the you got to make money, and now I'm a little. So this particular point was that I was seeing a lot of deals come in. I'm sure you've seen this, and it's like cool feature, not a business, right? That's a good feature. Facebook should offer that feature. It's a cool feature, and so that's what I was talking about. Is that it's just not enough to build a business. But I'm a little bit changed in the sense that a feature is a catalyst to something way bigger. And so if it's a feature that could actually maybe grow into something else and the management team or the entrepreneur or the tech people are really talented, I'm a little bit more open to it than I was. And so I think I was probably a little too aggressive on that, and I've opened up now to allow for some features. I'm still more, where is the business going to be? I still ask that question, but I'll probably at least hear it out if it's more of a feature in the front end.
Are concerns on the IP side when we talk about features being derivative works, or you think that now because there are all these platforms that sort of programmers and coders can build on, that derivative works aren't creating the same kinds of legal issues that they did in the past?
So from a copyright point of view, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you certainly, the basic idea of copyright is that if you're going to take a software feature that someone has, as long as you take the functional side of it and not the code and not the look of it, then you're going to be okay. You have to look at the patent side there, but if it's just functional, then that's not what's protected by copyright. So you should be free to come up with something that works the same way without infringing the copyright.
Samit, are you as concerned as perhaps Jeff would be in terms of distinguish between business and feature, or at the point that you become interested, they are a business? They're showing that they've already proved their concept, they're actually showing revenue, and therefore, as a result, you're willing to put in some money.
Yeah, we're pretty wary of the features. I see a lot of features that are interesting features, and I haven't made that transition yet that Jeff has. I'm still focused on the business. I think that and I'm still focused on the revenue and the business model and the fundamentals.
I think that's a distinction in where we play though, because for me, we need to find things, and so we got to leave a little more space for that iteration so that it gets to you when it's pretty baked.
Yeah.
So the question on that, like, would Zynga have originally been a feature of Facebook, or would that have been an actual business before, when the early stage?
Yeah, I think Zynga was a management bet. I mean, I think Mark Pincus probably could have brought in anything, we would have backed it. That's a good example of a deal that it's a content deal. It's I don't know if there's IP around what they've done, but
it's on the backbone of Facebook.
It's on the backbone of
cool
Facebook.
Feature,
it's a cool game, and he's got cool games. But you and I could have built that game. I mean, it's not. There's nothing really special about that. What was special about that was the management team. The management team.
Yeah, I'm worried about the whole IP stance. Am I wasting my time here? I put a fair effort into, researching the IP early on. Is anybody going to check the veracity of any claim I come up with, or?
Well, it depends on your business
That's
design.
exactly what I was gonna
If your business design is self-funding, or acquisition of building the company through sales, then it definitely matters, because you're still building enterprise value, building a structure for a strong exit, especially if you've got core IP or you developed around IP, so you don't have to worry about the litigation issues.
Because it sounds like, Dale, you're buying IP, and so it's important.
In a sense, I'm also building IP behind it though.
He is licensing it.
Yeah.
It depends on the kind of, like the first 5 years of our business, we focused really hardcore on IP and tech transfer and hard technology. And then the last 5, we've been interested in these new business models that are much less capital efficient. So it depends on where you are. If you've invented the refrigerator, the IP around that is very important.
Yeah.
If you haven't and you're doing something else, which is a unique business model, a unique product, it's maybe not so important. So it depends on what it is that you've invented.
If you're the next social network, yeah, probably not as important.
It's usually if it's something on the web that kind of, you described a little bit about your business, but to me, that's an area that I probably would focus less on the IP, because you're kind of manipulating things to make it better, right? And so it's hard to really not let somebody else manipulate it in a way that they think is a little bit better. And it's really ultimately the customer that's going to determine what's best. That's where you're going to get money from. But
If it's software, period, I wouldn't be worried about that.
Because it'll be obsolete.
So,
No, it's method, not software.
So you'll build your company up, you'll go public, it'll be valued at $100 billion, and then you use some of that money to buy a huge patent portfolio from Yahoo, and your company.
That's what happens to everyone, by the way. That's sort of the normal path.
You can buy Mark Zuckerberg's boat.
Right here.
Now, I have a client who, a media company, and their business model is acquiring comic books and characters and so forth. So to them, their focus is the intellectual property, because that's what they're trying to build. And so, they came to me and asked me to help them vet, make sure that all the agreements are in place with all the authors. And the first part of this conversation I'm hearing is, well, IP is not that important. We can deal with it if shit happens. But I think it also has to do with the nature of the business, and if you're more oriented towards, if IP is sort of a side issue versus is it at the core of your business, because if you are infringing on someone's trademark or copyright right at the point where you're trying to sell an important aspect of your business, then it could really hurt you.
I would think that most VCs don't invest in content deals. So
For that very reason.
for that reason,
Yeah.
And so, yes, in the entertainment/media world, IP is everything, because that is the product they sell. And so protecting that is, their competitive advantage. If they own Spider-Man, and every merchandising deal they have to protect that.
But there's an interesting thing that's occurred in the last several years with what's called UGC, user-generated content. And so you're essentially getting these tech companies that are building platforms. It's kind of what I was asking about earlier with that content. If you build a platform that enables you to, or enables your user to steal or borrow or whatever, that's content that was maybe user-generated, so that user owns it, but it's not really for sale. And so there's a very gray area right now. And
stuff.
yeah, and it's like, what's okay? And that's where I think the advice that sort of hearing is like, if you're starting a company that might be in that gray area, well, build it, and if it gets big, you'll deal with it then. It's a little bit flippant to think that way, but I think most entrepreneurs are thinking about it because they really just need to build something. And if it does work, and then your content company says, hey, wait a minute, you're stealing my content, then you have to strike a deal.
Yeah, and 50 cents off the dollar is better than none.
So Justin Bieber was not angry with YouTube.
Yeah, well, YouTube's an interesting story in and of itself.
So David, I want to ask you a question. Did I have a question out here? Okay, David, I want to ask you a question. In terms of the value of investment capital, is there a way that you can determine whether or not it's appropriate, valuable, and important for a client that you represent to actually accept money from a certain kind of investor, a VC, an angel?
Absolutely.
What are the criteria that you use?
So the first question I ask when I look at a startup or a new company is, what's your financial strategy? What's your capital strategy? If it's a high growth, fast growth type of venture, which requires somebody to sustain the operational losses for a series of years, then VC money is appropriate. If it is a structure or a business model that's going to generate a lot of cash flow quickly from sales, VC money is not the money you want. It's expensive money. You pay a lot in equity. So you have to look at the business model. What's the objectives of the entrepreneur? What's their exit strategy? How fast can venture capital money contribute to the velocity of capturing market share quickly? If it cannot, if it doesn't add value there, then it's not appropriate for that venture.
It's fuel.
Yeah,
Or
it's
fuel on a fire to make it bigger.
Exactly. If you want to take the rocket ship to the moon, and because you've got that kind of trajectory, that kind of business model, so as a lawyer, you have to be able to analyze the business model first to determine if it's appropriate to go the VC route. Because some models, like the content play for that gentleman over there, there might be angel investors that are in the entertainment business that would love that deal, that would get that, but that's a high cash flow business in my assessment. If they've got the distribution deals, they got the licensing deals, and they got the deals set up for the films, those will start generating cash right away. So you just need to start up capital, acquire the IP, and generate the deals. You don't have to raise subsequent rounds of financing to build it up to a certain level. You don't have to do a lot of acquisitions.
I just missed an important part. You said if the business is going to generate cash flow fairly rapidly,
Quickly.
significantly, don't go to VCs. Well, where do you get your funding then? Where do you go?
Well, you could self-generate from sales, or you go to certain partners, strategic partners, you go to angel investors that
Suppliers.
know the business, that are in the business or industry, they can offer strategic relationships, introductions to distribution deals or licensing deals.
Frankly, I think it's a gap. I think the answer to that question is a gap in the market. And from my perspective, I think there's a huge opportunity for angels, and I would personally love to create a fund myself of angel investors that want to invest in companies that are looking to get cash flow returns.
Or possibly pre-sales for your purchasers? Well,
Absolutely, you know.
But most investors, even angels and all the investors investing in startups are looking for exits. That's a long wait, right? Or it could never. So there's nothing wrong with investing something where in a year's time I'm going to be pulling $5 or $10 grand a month off the top line. That's a nice investment.
It's an income business. It's not a high growth, capital growth business.
So I've just got a few minutes left, so I got to wrap it up. And I want to take a couple of questions too, if we have any in the audience. Art, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the America Invents Act. Is there a fundamental change afoot that is going to take place in terms of how and when you can secure rights and intellectual property?
Yes, the American Invents Act was signed into law several months ago, and it's already had some significant effect. We can, make your patent application go faster. It's changed several sections in the Patent Act. In September, some additional things are going to go into place. I guess if I were to say what's the most important thing for a startup to keep in mind is that as of March of 2013, we moved to a first to file system, and what that means right now we have a first to invent system, so that it works pretty well for someone who can't afford to file, because if they did invent it and they can prove that they invented it, then they are going to be the first one to get the patent. But if you, under the new rules, you must move to the patent office faster. And so now under the new rules starting in March of 2013, you must file first before someone else files. Otherwise, you're going to lose your rights, even if you were the first inventor. That's probably the most important.
There's not a year grace period anymore, the year from when you invent to when you file?
No.
I do have a question for Art. There's different rules now for challenging after a patent's issued.
Yes.
As well, which actually makes it more difficult. It makes it less palatable for inventors. They're spending all that money that after they actually get the patent issued, then competitors can come in and challenge it after it's been issued and potentially invalidate it.
Yeah, of course you can already do some of that, but the methods by which you can challenge a patent have increased several-fold, basically, because you can even challenge it during the prosecution and then right afterwards, and then there's some inter-parties proceedings that you can institute a little bit later. So it's quite complicated, but the idea, you're exactly right, David. The idea is that there's much more opportunity to challenge a patent, and that was intentional. The idea is that if there's a patent out there that's not any good, it ought to be checked out by.
Does that diminish the value of patents?
I think it strengthens them. The ones that survive are going to be the ones that you know are good. So.
We got to wrap up. Dale, any parting thoughts, words of wisdom, recommendations for either startup, technology, emerging growth companies, or their advisors?
Oh, that's a big blanket one.
I gave you a heads up in the email.
Move fast. Stay light on your feet, pivot. Don't become intractable. Everything you think at the beginning of any endeavor is wrong. Just accept that as the beginning premise, and then it's easier to move from there.
Jeff, any trends that you're seeing in the accelerator?
Just there's a lot of stuff going on in the style space in LA. There's a lot of style related things. Not really my, like clothing, fashion,
That's strange because
makeup,
we
and
don't care about image.
yeah, there's just so much money going into that.
Samit?
No, I mean, I think, you know, the biggest thing that I always tell people is like, whatever you're thinking about doing, just do it. You know, it's not, the hardest part is just getting up and doing it. So if you've got something, you've got an idea and the software, stop overanalyzing, stop doing, just go do it.
And vice versa, if you're doing something that you don't like, stop doing it. Which is
What am I gonna do tomorrow? David, you've got the last word.
You know, everyone have a great night. I love you.
Guys, thank you so much for being here. If you have questions for the panel, feel free to